Hello. Still no solution on that one. Okay. So today let's do after looking at how the past exam was and after looking at, I think we solved around 8 questions from consolidation, right? And you guys have been trying to solve more. Plus, there are some section B questions on consolidation also that we have come across in the exam kit. What does a question on consolidation usually test you on? If I were to list out 5 areas that are usually asked in the questions, apart from the pre-populated balance sheet, okay, they will ask you to determine who is the acquirer. Think Columbia Company. Question 6 from the exam kit. Okay. What else do they ask you? They एक तो acquirer कौन है, then fair value of net assets acquired during uh the so what is the fair value of net assets that you will consider in the consolidated balance sheet. उसके लिए you have to consider quite a few points. For example, any internally generated intangible asset of the subsidiary, when you are preparing consolidated financial statements, that has to be included, or a contingent liability of the subsidiary company has to be included in the net asset value calculation when you are preparing the consolidated financial statements. Okay. Now we also looked at the deferred tax impact of these transactions. Ki samjho, if I acquire the net assets, or if I acquire a subsidiary entity, I acquire an 80% stake in it, and then there is a revaluation of non-current asset that takes place, then there is an associated deferred tax liability that is created. So on one hand, the total asset increases, and on the other hand, the total liability increases on account of the DTL. So it's got double effect and all that could be asked. What else is tested in terms of the theory bit, not pre-populated balance sheet? Trisha, can you name one such area that is often tested?
Yes, joint arrangements, whether it is a joint venture or a joint operation, and what method to use if it is converted into associates.
So, one common question is, there is a joint operation that is going on. Sorry, there is a joint arrangement. Is it a joint operation or is it a joint venture? If a separate entity is established, then it is a joint venture. If a separate entity is not established, then it is a joint ops. Joint venture hoga, so the treatment is as per IAS 28. A lot of questions, if you observe, they will say, explain the accounting treatment in the consolidated financial statements. So there आपको IAS 28 equity method of accounting use करना है if it is a joint venture. If it is a joint arrangement तो आप if it is joint ops तो आप क्या करेंगे? Liabilities में your share, assets में your share, expense में your share, income में your share. Basically your share in everything. It is a proportionate consolidation activity that you are doing. Correct? एक एक आइटम में आप proportionate consolidation कर रहे हो. Jayani, what else is tested in consolidation?
Step acquisition.
Step acquisition, step disposal. So step acquisition, step disposal, if you're talking, for example, step disposal, they will ask you what is the amount of profit to be shown in the standalone financial statements, amount of profit to be shown in the profit or loss to be shown in the consolidated financial statements. Then another type of question that might be asked is the thing that you are acquiring, is it a business? And what we have observed in the exam kit is, अपना concentration test पे इतना सारा questions नहीं है. Most of the questions are on the elements of business test, right? Input, process, output, whether output is there on the acquisition date, output is not there on the acquisition date. ये एक type का question हो गया. Another peculiar type of question which we saw on 3 occasions in the exam kit was sale of assets to a joint venture. Correct? And sale of assets to a joint venture, usme to of course, I'll walk you through all of that. But I think it was a DigiWire company in which we saw this. Ek aur question mein dekha tha where you are a co-venturer and you are transferring the asset to a joint venture at a profit. So how much profit will you account for? The profit that you account for is the other co-venturer's share of profit. You don't account for your share of profit. एक और peculiar situation we had seen, this is just एक ही बार ये एग्जाम किट में हुआ है, दैट इज A holding company transfers the asset to a joint holding company, nahi, investor company is the right word. Investor company transfers the asset to a joint venture. This is a downstream transaction and the asset is impaired. Matlab the transfer value, that is the fair value of the asset, is less than the carrying amount. In that case, you account for the entire loss, not the proportionate loss. ये एक टाइप का क्वेश्चन हुआ है. What else has been asked in consolidation? Have a quick run through of all the different types of questions that we went through.
फंक्शनल करेंसी होता.
एक
Control to control.
control to control scenario, yes, there is a question we did on that as well. So what is the amount that will be routed via the other components of equity? So हम आज ये सारी चीजें rapid तरीके से revise करेंगे. What we are going to do in the revision session is we are not going to get into the details of array why this is happening. What we are going to do is if this is the case, what is the outcome? This is the case, what is the outcome? ठीक है. If I had a good hold over chat GPT ना, मैं ऐसे बात करते करते उसको डिक्टेट करता and it would have made a nice PPT for me, वो मुझे नहीं आता है. तो if you can while we discuss things, if you can write it down as we are discussing, great. ठीक है, that will also help you to remain active during the session. थोड़ा सा लेट नाइट है तो आप थोड़ा inactive फील कर सकते हैं. चलो, let's look at the examiner report. This is the best thing to do, दूसरे की मिस्टेक से खुद सीखना. Okay, question 1. Using Exhibit 1 and in accordance with IFRS 10 consolidated financial statements, explain why Layout Company does not control Braziok Company as at 31st of December 2007. Now, when the question says explain why one company does not control Braziok Company, one company does not control the other company, where should your mind go? Our mind should go back to the fact that there are certain conditions which have been given to define what is control, right? Either a 50% holding in the other company is control, then your holding could be less than 50%. Say, for example, your holding is 48%, but the remaining proportion of shares are held by a large number of diverse shareholders who are spread over the basically length and breadth of the country, and it is very difficult for them to come together and take a unanimous decision. So that could be another scenario. Then holding, convertible rights which are substantive in nature. So basically when a question asks you about control, it has to be one of these scenarios, right? What they are saying is part A was generally answered well, although some candidates strayed beyond the requirement. An explanation of why Braziok is an associate was not required, nor how an associate is accounted for under the equity method. The question did not ask for how the investment should be treated, but the question specifically asks you, क्या पूछा है? Why does Layout Company not control Braziok Company? So आपको क्या करना पड़ेगा? आपको 4 और 5 जो conditions है ना for defining control, आपको वो conditions पहले define करने पड़ेंगे in the question. Then you will have to say कि there are 5 conditions, but Layout Company does not fulfill any of the conditions. Hence, this is not an entity that Layout Company is controlling. ठीक है. Using Exhibit 2, explain with appropriate calculations how the defined benefit plan should be accounted for in the year ended 31st of December 2007. Now, there are two parts to this question. Explain with appropriate calculations how the defined benefit plan should be accounted for. So there has to be a question आप कैसे करेंगे? सबसे पहले आप you will prepare the entire working of a defined benefit plan. Opening net obligation से आपका शुरुआत होगा, right? You will start with the opening net obligation, net asset. Then what will you do after that?
So we will add
Add
the
interest, then
interest,
contribution, वो सारा कुछ करेंगे.
service.
You will arrive at the current service, past service cost करेंगे. You will arrive at a closing value. फिर वो जो closing value है, that you will compare with the fair value of net assets or net obligation. The difference will be routed through other comprehensive income. Now, ये तो हो गया आपका calculation. ठीक है. Now they are saying, so that part is the calculation part. How the defined benefit plan should be accounted for, which means वो पूरा जो table है उसमें का which value goes to which part of the financial statements is very important. आपको वो बताना है, जैसे current and past service cost will go to P&L, then remeasurement component will go to OCI. So 8 marks के लिए first part is the calculation, second part is the specific treatment, the specific expectation is how should it be accounted for. ठीक है, ये कहाँ कहाँ जाएगा, where all will it go, will it go to P&L, what part will go to balance sheet, how much amount will go where, and how is it presented. So पूरा description आपको देना पड़ेगा, only after that you will get 8 marks. ठीक है, now using exhibits 2 and 3, adjust the pre-populated spreadsheet option to correct the draft consolidated statement of financial position as at 31st of March 2007 for the following facts. Braziok Company is an associate, not a subsidiary of Layout Company, and the defined benefit pension plan has not been correctly accounted for. अब यहाँ पे pre-populated balance sheet में क्या होता है? In a pre-populated balance sheet, their specific focus is Braziok Company ka accounting that you have to specifically mention, and the defined benefit pension plan. How should you account for that? Now, if the other company is an associate and you have shown, and you know the company has adjusted that and presented that as a subsidiary, तो आपको पहले उस accounting treatment को reverse करना पड़ेगा, and then you will have to show the equity method of accounting that is often used for associates. So सबसे पहले जो सब्सिडियरी करके उसका प्रेजेंटेशन है इन द फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट्स, उसका इंपैक्ट आप रिमूव करो, एंड देन गिव द करेक्ट इम्पैक्ट एज द एसोसिएट एंटिटी. तो आपको जो गुडविल है वो आपको हटाना पड़ेगा, पीपीई का रिवैल्यूएशन हुआ है वो हटाना पड़ेगा, प्री पोस्ट एक्विजिशन प्रॉफिट वाला एडजस्टमेंट, सारा कुछ रिवर्स करके, सी दिस इज एन उल्टा क्वेश्चन, सारा कुछ रिवर्स करके आपको फिर एसोसिएट का इम्पैक्ट देना है. नाउ if possible, if we get the time, ये question paper is now available. We'll see if we can solve the question together in the class. Okay. Now, as you move on, question 2, which is on आपका ethics. Discuss the correct presentation of the following issues in the consolidated financial statements. 11.1 million net investment in long borrowings and high interest bank account. What is the second part? Discuss the ethical issues and the actions which Mr. Lennox should take to address these issues. Now, when you try to solve the question paper and you see कि यार examiner ने क्या क्या comments दिया है, आपको पता चलेगा what are some of those areas where most people make a mistake. If they have asked you in consolidated financial statements कि prepare the, or rather update the pre-populated balance sheet and explain the adjustments, ऐसा भी कुछ कुछ questions में होता है where they specifically tell you explain the adjustments. So in 2 to 3 lines you have to explain each and every adjustment that you have done in the pre-populated balance sheet. So the most important part still remains reading the requirement and then coming to a conclusion. Okay, now as we saw, the whole discussion on consolidation एक बहुत लंबा चौड़ा discussion है, which in our regular class we took around 20 hours. So we are not doing it again. अब फिर से करने बैठेंगे तो September attempt आ जाएगा. So that of course cannot be the way out. जो मैंने क्लास में नोट्स यूज किए थे, आई एम गोइंग टू बी यूजिंग द सेम नोट्स. आई विल आस्क यू क्वेश्चंस, यू हैव टू गिव मी आंसर्स. ठीक है. नाउ let's talk about the two methods of calculation of goodwill. Is everyone aware of that? दो methods है, मैं जिसको बोलूंगा that person should answer. Nidhi, tell me the two methods for calculation of goodwill in consolidated financial statements.
Fair value method and proportionate of net assets.
The first one is your full goodwill method. ठीक है. Full goodwill method में you take the fair value of non-controlling interest at acquisition date. Fair, and the second method is the proportionate share of net assets of subsidiary method. There what you do is you calculate the fair value of net assets of subsidiary, you multiply that with the percentage holding of NCI and you get your answer. ठीक है. Now if we look at the first method, which is the full goodwill method, वहां पे how exactly are we going to calculate the goodwill? Can you tell me the formula, Jayani?
So it will be the fair value of the consideration paid by the holding company. To that you will add the fair value of the non-controlling interest, and you'll
Correct.
subtract the fair value of the net assets of the subsidiary at the acquisition date.
Correct. So fair value of consideration paid, it could be cash, or it could be cash plus share, or it could be only share consideration. To that you will add fair value of non-controlling interest, which will be given in the question, less fair value of net assets of subsidiary at acquisition date. If you are using the proportionate goodwill method, ठीक है, प्रोपोर्शनेट गुडविल मेथड आप कैसे निकालेंगे? फेयर वैल्यू ऑफ कंसिडरेशन पेड बाय होल्डिंग कंपनी, दिस विल बी गिवन और इट विल हैव टू बी कैलकुलेटेड. कैश हो, either they will say 5 lakh was paid, or they will say for every share acquired you paid 5 rupees per share. So that is how it will be calculated. Add value of NCI. I have not written fair value of NCI, I have written value of NCI. आप take net assets of subsidiary, multiply that with the share of NCI, you will get your answer. Less fair value of net assets of subsidiary. This you will have to calculate share capital plus reserves and surplus plus all the fair value adjustments. You will get the fair value of net assets. ये जो goodwill मिलेगा, this will be the proportionate. This will be only goodwill belonging to the holding company. जो first वाला method था अपना, the full goodwill method, that was goodwill relating to the entire subsidiary. उसमें NCI का भी share था, holding company का भी share था. Now, if the goodwill gets impaired and you are using the full goodwill method, what should you do? If you are using the full goodwill method, total impairment निकालो. ठीक है, टोटल इम्पेयरमेंट दे विल टेल यू कि यार इम्पेयरमेंट वाज 25,000 और 25% ऑफ द गुडविल वाज इम्पेयर्ड. इम्पेयरमेंट का वैल्यू निकालो, स्प्लिट द वैल्यू बिटवीन होल्डिंग कंपनी एंड नॉन कंट्रोलिंग इंटरेस्ट. सो आपका जो गुडविल होगा, दैट गुडविल विल गेट रिड्यूस्ड बाय द एंटायर अमाउंट. एंड व्हाट विल यू डेबिट? कंसोलिडेटेड रिटेन्ड अर्निंग्स में से यू विल सब्ट्रैक्ट द शेयर ऑफ द होल्डिंग कंपनी, एनसीआई में से यू विल सब्ट्रैक्ट द शेयर ऑफ एनसीआई, एंड गुडविल का वैल्यू यू विल रिड्यूस बाय द एंटायर इम्पेयरमेंट. सो द अकाउंटिंग एंट्री इन दैट केस विल बी कंसोलिडेटेड रिटेन्ड अर्निंग्स अमाउंट डेबिट विद द शेयर ऑफ होल्डिंग कंपनी, एनसीआई अकाउंट डेबिट विद द शेयर ऑफ एनसीआई. क्रेडिट कौन होगा? क्रेडिट होगा आपका गुडविल विद द फुल अमाउंट. ठीक है, यहां पे इफ यू आर यूजिंग द प्रोपोर्शनेट गुडविल मेथड, ठीक है, in this case if there is impairment of goodwill, you will subtract it from, say for example you are using the proportionate goodwill method, impairment is 15,000. 15,000 आप subtract करोगे गुडविल से, 15,000 आप subtract करोगे from consolidated retained earnings, you will not subtract anything from the NCI because NCI का शेयर है ही नहीं गुडविल में. ठीक है, दिस कैन कम एज एन एडजस्टमेंट कि गुडविल इंपेयर हो गया. स्पेसिफिकली इफ यू हैव सीन प्री पॉपुलेटेड फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट्स में, व्हाट दे डू इज, दिस इज एन एडजस्टमेंट जो आपको एड बैक करना होता है. इफ यू रिमेंबर, एक कैश फ्लो का हमने फुल लेंथ क्वेश्चन किया था. इन दैट क्वेश्चन द इम्पेयरमेंट ऑफ इम्पेयरमेंट ऑफ गुडविल हैड टू बी एडेड बैक. दैट वाज वन ऑफ द हिडन एडजस्टमेंट्स. था ना एक ऐसा क्वेश्चन, ओपनिंग बैलेंस ऑफ गुडविल,
Yes, sir.
बैलेंस ऑफ गुडविल.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
अब एग्जाम के क्वेश्चन है ऐसा. ओके, नाउ let's understand what do we do with intercompany balances, intercompany debtor creditor. Ibrahim, what
Yes, sir.
should we do with intercompany debtor creditor?
Will get cancelled out.
You will cancel it out. टोटल डेटर्स में से माइनस करो, टोटल क्रेडिटर्स में से माइनस करो. ठीक है, नाउ if where the consideration is not given, ठीक है, fair value of consideration paid is the starting point. What if the consideration is not given? How will you do it? Directly value नहीं दिया है, so in that case they will either give you कि against one share acquired you paid 5 rupees. ठीक है, so that is the cash consideration. And they might also give you information that for every 5 shares acquired, 3 shares were issued in exchange. ठीक है, so you will have to calculate how many shares were issued in exchange. You will have to multiply that with the fair value of shares of the holding company, and that would be the value of your share consideration. So दो parts बनेंगे, number of shares issued by the subsidiary, multiply the number in step 1 by the percentage holding. So subsidiary के 1 lakh shares है, you have acquired 80% of it, so shares acquired is 80,000. Note down the exchange ratio to arrive at the number of shares issued. Number of shares issued को multiply करो with the fair value of one share of holding company. You will get the value of share consideration. ठीक है? एक बार just have a look at this question and also have a look at the solution. ये सब वैसे हमारा क्लास में हो चुका है by the way. Guys, just ensure that if you are not talking to me, you are on mute.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have a look at the remaining part, then we'll move on to the next one.
Done, sir.
Done? Okay. Chalo. This was one of the earliest things that we did when we were doing consolidation. Now let's talk about the unrealized profit wala adjustment. This can come in your exam in the consolidated balance sheet or in the consolidated P&L. Okay. You will have to understand whether it is the holding company who has sold goods to the subsidiary or is it the subsidiary which has sold goods to the holding company. Okay. If holding sells to subsidiary, what do we call it? Downstream transaction. If subsidiary sells it to the holding, what do we call it? Upstream transaction. इस केस में आप क्या करेंगे? Calculate the amount of unsold stock, calculate the profit on unsold stock. ठीक है, when you calculate the profit on unsold stock, वो जो भी आपका value आएगा, reduce the closing stock in consolidated balance sheet by the amount in step 2 and reduce consolidated retained earnings on liability side of the balance sheet by the amount in step 2. So प्रॉफिट ऑन अनसोल्ड स्टॉक दो जगह से सब्ट्रैक्ट करना है. सी दिस इज प्रॉफिट रिकॉर्डेड बाय द होल्डिंग कंपनी. होल्डिंग कंपनी का प्रॉफिट कहां पर होता है? होल्डिंग कंपनी का प्रॉफिट इज इन द कंसोलिडेटेड रिटेन्ड अर्निंग्स. तो आप कहां से सब्ट्रैक्ट करेंगे? यू विल सब्ट्रैक्ट इट फ्रॉम कंसोलिडेटेड रिटेन्ड अर्निंग्स एंड यू विल रिड्यूस इट फ्रॉम द क्लोजिंग स्टॉक. If the transaction is ulta, that is subsidiary company has sold goods to holding company, then in that case, first of all, calculate the profit on unsold stock. Then, whatever is the profit on unsold stock, वो amount आपको subtract करना है from the total closing stock in consolidated balance sheet. ये जो भी profit था, because this is subsidiary that has sold goods to the holding company. ठीक है, तो calculate the amount of profit on unsold stock, multiply that with the share of the holding company. ठीक है, वो जो भी आपका value आएगा, subtract that amount from consolidated retained earnings, and whatever is the amount of unsold, whatever is the amount of profit on unsold stock, उसको आप multiply करो with the share of non-controlling interest, subtract that amount from NCI. In some books, rather in most ACCA books, their approach is different. Ultimate impact तो same ही होता है. My approach is slightly different. I tell the student, because if you have studied with me, हमने तो class में throughout यही approach follow किया है. ठीक है. So just have a look at it. If you want, I will share it with you. I will share the notes with you if you want. कोई problem नहीं है. ठीक है. अब ये सारी चीजें, these are basically FA level से हम पढ़ते आ रहे हैं. So this is assumed knowledge at P level. ठीक है, एक बार देख लो.
Done, sir.
ठीक है, ओके। अब इस पे क्वेश्चन देखने का जरूरत नहीं है, जस्ट रिमेंबर द स्टेप्स एंड मूव ऑन। अभी उतना ही करना है, अभी रिमेंबर द स्टेप्स एंड मूव ऑन, अभी लॉजिक टाइम इज ओवर। चलो, now let's talk about, tell me, how do we perform consolidation of a balance sheet? Step by step बताना, तो let's start with the first step. We identify who is the acquirer and we identify who is the investee. ये कर लिया. Then we identify the date of acquisition. Why is that? Because we need to know whether it is a mid-year acquisition or not. है ना? वो आपने एक identify कर लिया. Now tell me the 5 non-negotiable working notes that have to be prepared in every consolidated balance sheet का question. कि ये तो बनेगा ही बनेगा. There are 5 such compulsory working notes. First one is group structure, where we write the percentage shareholding and the date of acquisition. Second one is
Net asset.
Fair
Net
value
assets of
of net
subsidiaries.
Fair
assets of
value of net
subsidiaries.
asset subsidiary as on acquisition date.
very good. मैंने कितनी बार बोला है, do not call it net assets. The name of the working note is fair value of net assets of subsidiary, because all the fair value adjustments are going to happen there. Third working note is goodwill.
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 Number 4 is consolidated retained earnings.
Yes.
No.
Number 5 is
NCI.
Non-controlling interest.
Non-controlling interest.
interest. Okay. ये 5 वर्किंग नोट्स नॉन नेगोशिएबल है, उसके ऊपर आप जो भी करेंगे वो इट विल बी ऑन द रिक्वायरमेंट्स इन द क्वेश्चन. नाउ हाउ डज कंसोलिडेशन एक्चुअली वर्क? आप क्या करते हो? यू डू अ लाइन बाय लाइन कंसोलिडेशन, राइट? होल्डिंग प्लस, अगर होल्डिंग का नॉन करंट असेट लिखा तो उसमें अब सब्सिडियरी का नॉन करंट असेट यू विल ऐड. होल्डिंग का डेटर, उसमें यू विल ऐड द सब्सिडियरी का डेटर. ठीक है, ये ऐसे करके आप ऑल द नॉन करंट असेट्स एंड करंट असेट्स, ऑल द नॉन करंट लाइबिलिटीज एंड करंट लाइबिलिटीज, यू विल डू अ लाइन बाय लाइन कंसोलिडेशन. लाइन बाय लाइन कंसोलिडेशन मतलब होल्डिंग प्लस सब्सिडियरी पूरा वैल्यू आप ऐड कर देंगे, प्लस कुछ इंटरकंपनी बैलेंसेस होगा तो दोज विल गेट एलिमिनेटेड. Now, on the liability side, another thing that you do is you write the share capital of holding company, share premium of holding company. Subsidiary company का share capital, share premium, revaluation surplus, retained earnings. Where is all of this rooted? All of this gets rooted in the fair value of net assets वाला working note. Correct? वहां से आप net assets निकालते हो and then you subtract that from the total consideration paid in order to acquire, in order to arrive at the amount of goodwill. ठीक है. Consolidated retained earnings वाला जो working note है उसमें the first entry is, or the first line item that you write is retained earnings of holding company at the balance sheet date. ठीक है, retained earnings of holding company at the balance sheet date. उसमें आप क्या ऐड करेंगे? उसमें you will add a whole lot of other items. Share of holding company in post acquisition profit of subsidiary. कोई unrealized profit होगा तो उसका adjustment होगा, goodwill impairment होगा तो वो subtract होगा. So ऐसे all of this करके you will get the consolidated retained earnings which will go to consolidated balance sheet. अगर पी एंड एल को कंसोलिडेट करना है तो अगेन चेक वेदर द एक्विजिशन हैज हैपेंड एट द स्टार्ट ऑफ द ईयर और इज इट अ मिड ईयर एक्विजिशन. ठीक है, इफ एक्विजिशन हैपेंड एट द स्टार्ट ऑफ द ईयर, पूरा का पूरा लाइन बाय लाइन कंसोलिडेट कर दो. सेल्स प्लस सेल्स, कॉस्ट ऑफ सेल्स प्लस कॉस्ट ऑफ सेल्स, एडमिन एक्सपेंस प्लस एडमिन एक्सपेंस. बट इफ द एक्विजिशन हैपेंड ड्यूरिंग द मिडिल ऑफ द ईयर, ठीक है, अगर योर फाइनेंशियल ईयर इज April to March and acquisition happened on 1st of October, तो सब्सिडियरी कंपनी का 6 months का सेल ऐड करो, सब्सिडियरी कंपनी का 6 months का कॉस्ट ऑफ सेल्स ऐड करो, एडमिन एक्सपेंस 6 months का ऐड करो, ऐसे करो. Now, when you arrive at the profit after tax, you have to split this profit after tax between NCI and amount belonging to holding company. What will you calculate first?
NCI.
Profit belonging to non-controlling interest, profit attributable to NCI. वो कैसे निकलेगा? You will take profit after tax of subsidiary company into share of NCI. That will be the profit attributable to NCI. बचा हुआ entire amount goes to, the remaining amount is
Holding.
balancing amount is holding.
Holding company.
Now you have to keep in mind one thing, कि जब आप ये particular activity करते हैं, you write amount attributable to holding company first, but you calculate the amount attributable to NCI first, and holding company का जो value होता है, that is the balancing figure. ठीक है? Now, a point that might come in your ethics question, because ये एक दो ethics question में मैंने देखा है past में, is exemption from consolidation. There are only two cases in which an entity would be exempt from preparing consolidated financial statements. First situation is if you are an intermediate parent. Intermediate parent matlab I am an entity, I have subsidiaries, but I myself am a subsidiary of someone else. So मैं बीच का parent हूँ. There is a parent above me and then there are subsidiaries below me. If certain conditions are fulfilled, then the intermediate parent is exempt from consolidation. And there is another situation. What is that?
Investment in
Entity.
Investment entities.
Very good. Chalo, yaad hai. Have a quick look at this about the intermediate parent. I'll be back in a moment. तब तक आप ये पढ़ लो. ठीक है? Quick. Okay. So in case of an intermediate parent, so Y का subsidiary है Z and Y itself is a subsidiary of X. The intermediate parent is exempt from consolidation if all of the following conditions apply. Wholly owned subsidiary or partially owned subsidiary where owners of NCI do not object to non-preparation. its debt or equity instruments are not currently traded in a domestic or foreign market, not in the process of having any of its debt or equity instruments traded on a domestic stock market, and ultimate parent entity produces consolidated financial statements that comply with IFRS standards. So, agar Y is a subsidiary of X and Y has a subsidiary called Z, X company is preparing consolidated financial statements which are IFRS compliant. Shares and debentures of Y are not currently listed on a stock exchange. Shares and debentures of Y are not in the process of getting listed on the stock exchange, and the ultimate parent entity produces CFS, that is X Limited produces CFS. Then and ये जो Y company का Y, it's wholly owned or partially owned subsidiary where owners of NCI do not object to non-preparation. So if the owners of non-controlling interest, Y is a subsidiary of X and NCI of Y do not have an objection to Y's decision to not consolidate financial statements, then the intermediate parent wala exemption applies. या फिर it is an investment entity. And I think we had taken the example of Kotak Mutual Fund, SBI Mutual Fund, that they do invest in, say, SBI में उनका 70% holding है and किसी और कंपनी में उनका 85% holding है, but they invest these funds only for the purpose of capital appreciation and gaining wealth, not for the purpose of controlling the activities of the other company. So in that case, again, the investment entity is exempt from consolidation. ये छोड़ के if there is any other reason that the company has given in the question कि ये reason की वजह से we have decided not to consolidate, then you should ignore that reason and say that you are not compliant with the requirements of the accounting standard. And ये दो reason छोड़ के there is no other valid reason which you can use for justifying the non-consolidation of the subsidiary entity. Now, let's talk about IFRS 3 is about business combination. ठीक है, बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन कब होगा? जब दूसरा एंटिटी बिजनेस होगा. Only if the other entity is a business, then you can say, okay, I'm applying the concept of business combination. How do you decide whether the other entity is a business or not? There are two tests that are there in the SBR syllabus. There are more tests actually that can be applied, but we are going to apply only two tests. The first one is the concentration test. The second one is the elements of business test. What does the concentration test say? The concentration test is satisfied if substantially all of the fair value of the total assets acquired is concentrated in a single identifiable asset or a group of similar identifiable asset. It is also known as the optional concentration test, not just the concentration test. It is an optional test, which means it's not compulsory to apply this in order to determine whether the other entity is a business or not. We had taken a simple example where Satyamid Limited acquires Amol Limited and the fair value of all the assets acquired is 1000. Amol Limited is a bakery. This can, and it has different assets. What are those assets? Fan hai 100 ka, ovens है oven का fair value है 500, chair का value है 150, table का value है 230, total is 980. ठीक है, the concentration test is met if substantially all of the fair value of total assets is concentrated in a single asset or a group of similar identifiable assets. Total of the fair value of individual assets is 980. Amount paid to acquire them is 1000. Most of the fair value is attributable to specific assets. That means assets जिनका total fair value था 980, Satyamid Limited paid 1000. ठीक है. Now, had Satyamid Limited not acquired the shares in Amol Limited, it also had an option कि यार market में जाओ and purchase individual assets from the market and pay 100 for fan, 500 for oven, 150 for chair and 230 for table. तो यहाँ पे it is a coincidence that Satyamid Limited got all the four assets in one place. Had he gone and purchased these assets in the open market, he would have pretty much gotten these assets at the same value from the open market. So, had Satyamid Limited acquired the same assets from four different sources, he would have pretty much paid the same amount that he paid for the total package. This appears more like a purchase of individual assets packaged as a combined deal. Satyamid Limited has not paid anything significantly higher or extra for these assets, which is why we say that this is an acquisition of assets, not an acquisition of business. आप एक और सिचुएशन पकड़ो, टोटल अमाउंट पेड टू अक्वायर द बिजनेस 1400, value of single asset in the business 1200. Substantially all of the amount paid is towards the single asset, so the concentration test is met. Total amount paid to acquire the business 2000, total value of single asset 1200. यहाँ पे क्या लिखा है, concentration test is met if substantially all of the fair value of total assets is concentrated in a single identifiable asset. This word substantially is very important. मतलब यहाँ पे मैंने कितना पे किया, मैंने 2000 पे किया, बट उसमें से सिंगल असेट में ओनली 1200 इज देयर. यहाँ पे मैंने 1400 पे किया, उसमें का 1200 इज देयर इन अ सिंगल असेट. आप ये देखो, 1200 upon 1400 is a big number, 86% almost. I can say that a substantial part of the amount paid is concentrated in a single asset. यहाँ पे amount in single asset is 1200 and total amount paid to acquire the business is 2000. Now, total amount paid में से only 60% is concentrated in a single asset. So you can say that the concentration test has failed here, and this is an acquisition of a business. If substantially the entire value paid is concentrated in a single asset, like in this case, you will say that it is not a business. Otherwise, you will say that the whatever you have acquired that has features of a business. आपको most cases में concentration test is not asked in the exam. What they ask you is the elements of a business test, and they specifically tell you that there are 3 elements of a business: inputs, processes, and outputs. But output on the acquisition date is not so important. ठीक है, आपका most important item है there has to be a process. ठीक है, and there have to be inputs also, of course. If there are no outputs at the acquisition date, then an acquired process is only substantive if it is critical to convert an input to output, and inputs include a knowledgeable, skilled, organized workforce able to perform that process on other acquired assets. आपको check करना पड़ेगा कि on the date of acquisition, is there an output that the target company is making? If the target company, if there is an output that exists, then the process is critical. Substantive matlab it counts for something only if that process is critical to convert an input to output, and inputs acquired include a knowledgeable, skilled, organized workforce. अगर acquisition date पे कोई output नहीं है, हो सकता है in fintech startups or other startups which are in the process of creating a new technology, and somebody else is paying money to acquire that startup, तो acquisition date पे ऐसा हो सकता है कि there is no output. ठीक है, but you are in the process of creating something valuable, you are in the process of creating something meaningful. The process is substantive if it is critical to continue to produce outputs, and the inputs acquired include an organized workforce with the skills and knowledge to perform that process, or significantly contributes to the ability to continue producing outputs and is either rare or not capable. Now, यहाँ पे there is one question from the study text that comes to my mind. वो question में there is something like you have acquired another company, it has no employees, there is only there is only cleaning and maintenance work that happens. Is the process acquired substantive? याद आ रहा है आपको?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Cleaning and services का एक part था.
हाँ, and in that
ऑफिस ऑक्यूपाइड ऑफिस और हाउस से दो अलग तरह
yes,
के
correct. चलो, I'm happy आप लोगों को याद आ रहा है at least. चलो, it gives me confidence more than giving you the confidence that you guys are prepared. Now, in this case, say for if the other entity that I am acquiring, is there an output on the acquisition date? If there is an output on the acquisition date, the process is substantive, as in the process counts for something if it is critical to convert an input into output, and inputs acquired include a knowledgeable, skilled, organized workforce. यहाँ पे अगर आप condition देखोगे तो and condition है, दोनों चाहिए. Process is critical to convert input to output, and inputs acquired include a knowledgeable, skilled, organized workforce able to perform that process on acquired or any other inputs. And if there are no outputs at the acquisition date, then an acquired process is substantive if it is critical to continuing the if it is critical to continuing to produce outputs and the inputs acquired include an organized workforce with the skills and knowledge to perform that process, or significantly contributes to the ability to continue producing outputs and is either rare or not capable of easy replacement. इसके लिए I'll make you read the solution to two questions. ठीक है? I think ये वही question है, cleaning and maintenance service वाला,
Yes, sir.
है ना? Just go through this once. Read the question, then read the solution.
Can you scroll?
Yes, sir. तू आज लाइब्रेरी में नहीं है मकस?
लाइब्रेरी में ही हूँ लेकिन कोई है नहीं इधर।
अकेला बच्चा पढ़ रहा है, देखो इसको।
Done, sir.
पढ़ लो पूरा। Tell me when you want me to scroll.
Please scroll.
Yes.
Done, sir.
Okay. I'll tell you guys something funny, but after the class is done and after we have switched off the recording, not before that. Chalo. Let's look at one more question on the same concept, and उसमें side में ना I have done some additional notings. ठीक है, एक बार just go through this one also. ये right का पहले मत पढ़ो, पहले ये पूरा पढ़ो, then I'll take you on the right.
Please go on.
Yes, sir.
So done.
ठीक है, अब ना have this is not to be included in the answer, but यहाँ पे ये जो लिखा था ना, each of Kofta's assets has a similar fair value, उसका implication क्या है? I have just made some notation on that. एक बार वो भी देख लो. ठीक है?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, elements of a business test हो गया. अभी the idea of control. According to IFRS 10, an investor controls an investee when the investor has power over the investee and the investor is exposed to or has rights to variable returns from its involvement with the investee, and the investor has the ability to affect those returns through its power over the investee. So I have power means more than 50% holding हो सकता है, but I am exposed to variable returns from my involvement with the investee. Had I given a loan to the investee, I am not exposed to variable returns. Then I am only getting my fixed interest every month. And that means giving a loan to the other entity or investing in preference shares does not necessarily or does not make me does not create a relationship of control. For that, I should be exposed to variable returns from my involvement with the investee, and the investor has the ability to affect those returns through its power over the investee. So I can tell the other entity, do this, don't do this, and thereby I am controlling the activities. Thereby, I am controlling the variable returns that I will be getting. So all the three conditions are necessary for establishment of control. There are 5 cases in which control can be established, although there are more. हमारे syllabus में we are looking at only 5. First one is exercise of the majority of voting rights in an investee. Then contractual arrangements between the investor and other parties. Contractual arrangement means, say I'm the grand holding company. There is another company in which I own 100% shares, and then there is a third company in which I own 45% shares. And the remaining 55% shares are held by this subsidiary जिसमें मेरा 100% holding है. So directly or indirectly, I am controlling the third entity. Holding less than 50% shares holding less than 50% of the voting rights with all other equity interests held by a numerically large, dispersed and unconnected group. ठीक है. Holding less than 50% of the voting shares, maybe it could be say holding 46% shares, but जो remaining 54 है, they are split between thousands and lakhs of shareholders who can never come together and exercise the 54% to cancel out any of my decisions. So that would also create a situation of control. Holding potential voting rights such as convertible loans that are currently capable of being exercised. So it could be a situation that right now I hold 35% shares of the investee. I also hold some debentures or loan notes of the investee, and these loan notes are capable of these loan notes have a feature that they can be converted into equity shares. Now what happens is I have to check whether these are capable of being exercised. What does that mean? Is it highly probable that I will exercise these conversion rights and convert the debentures into equity shares, which will take my holding beyond 50%? If there is a high probability that these shares are these convertible options are capable of being exercised and I will end up exercising them, taking my holding to more than 50%, then in that case, I will say that अगेन आई हैव कंट्रोल ओवर द इन्वेस्टी, ऑल्दो मेरा करंट डेट में होल्डिंग सिर्फ 35% होगा, तो भी आई विल कंसोलिडेट द अदर कंपनी. I think there is one more question in the exam kit where I consolidate the other company even though my holding is less than 50%. And we have done one such question जहाँ पे NCI का share is 52% or something. किया है ना?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
हाँ, मुझे नाम नहीं याद आ रहा है, बट ये भी एक क्वेश्चन हमने किया है.
I think सर चक्कर कंपनी है.
चकल वो, हाँ, चकल ग्रिन एंड ऑल ऑफ दैट, करेक्ट. गाइस थोड़ा कैमरा ऑन करो, आई हैव हैड अ लॉन्ग डे. मैं 35 ब्लैक बॉक्सेस देखूंगा क्या? बस आप लोग तो सुबह आराम से उठोगे, तो गिव मी सम एनर्जी ना. हाँ, हीरो लग रहा है. बस. तेरा घर कितना दूर है लाइब्रेरी से?
5 मिनट।
5 मिनट, ओके. मैं तो जिंदगी में कभी बैठ के पढ़ ही नहीं पाया. आइदर वॉक एंड स्पीक लाउडली और लाई ऑन द बेड एंड स्टडी, तभी हुआ मेरा पढ़ाई. चलो. Last is nature of investors' relationship with other parties that may enable that investor to exercise control over an investee. मतलब nature of investors' relationship is like I have a subsidiary which is a wholly owned subsidiary. It exercises control over another company. So एक chain holding के form में भी control can be established. ठीक है. Acquisition accounting is the line by line consolidation. ठीक है. That is what is acquisition accounting. Equity method of accounting is, क्या है equity method of accounting? IAS 28.
सिंगल लाइन.
So single line, which we use
One
for
line.
investment.
So you don't have to do a line by line consolidation. Take the amount of investment in the investee, उसमें add करो share of investor company in post acquisition profit of associate. वो वाला जो method है, that is the equity method of accounting. In the acquisition method, you have to, there are a couple of points that will be tested. The first one is identifying the acquirer. Acquirer is usually the entity that has assumed control over the other entity. In a business combination, in the questions that are given to you, it will not be clear who is the acquirer. ठीक है. उस केस में आपको क्या करना है? There are some points that have been given under IFRS 3 to decide who is the acquirer. Entity which has transferred cash or other assets in a business combination, या फिर the business entity which has issued equity interest. I think in the Columbia company question, Colombia has paid cash and it has issued equity interest. Brazil Limited has only given cash, which was one of the points that helped us to say that Colombia company is the acquirer. Why? Because it issued equity shares also. Other factors to consider: the acquirer is usually the entity whose former management dominates the combined entity. Exam में आपको बहुत mixed signal मिलेंगे यहाँ पे. That in a board, there are 5 directors, 3 are appointed by one company, 2 are appointed by other company. आपको लगेगा यार ये 3 वाले को मैं acquirer बोलता हूँ. फिर next line होगा the CEO is appointed by this company. फिर आपको confusion हो जाएगा. Right. फिर then they will say something like acquirer is usually the entity whose owners have the largest portion of voting rights. 50-50 हुआ तो फिर confusion होगा. Acquirer is normally the bigger entity. Can be a little confusing sometimes. But most of the questions, may what we have observed in class is कि the deciding factor becomes the entity which has issued equity interest. Right. Columbia company में भी वही था, and in a lot of other questions also this becomes the deciding factor. बाकी सब चीजें ना, they point you in different directions, but issuing equity interest is something that only one entity does, and hence that becomes your acquirer entity. ठीक है. ये abacus and calculator I think was one of those interesting questions which helped us to get the idea of the acquirer part very very clear. एक बार question पढ़ो and then also read the explanation with it. Tell me when you want me to scroll.
So please scroll.
So, there was a situation today in one of the exam kit questions where the conclusion was not on like one side. लोग ने ऐसा बोला था इक्वली बैलेंस्ड है मतलब दोनों साइड में तो कोई भी साइड का कंक्लूजन दे के वी कैन प्रूव ना दैट ही इज द एक्वायर करके
You can, but also the fact remains कि was it equally divided on all counts?
तो मैंने जब किया तब मेरा जो लास्ट वो लोग ने कंक्लूजन दिया वो तो मैच हुआ बट वो लोग ने उसमें पैराग्राफ पीछे डाला आंसर में कि इट वाज इक्वली बैलेंस्ड बट स्टिल वी कैन चूज दिस बिकॉज ये सारे रीजंस है मतलब दोनों मिला के तो कोई भी एक साइड में वो लोग ने ऐसा बोला था कि इक्वली बैलेंस्ड है बट स्टिल यू कैन चूज दिस बिकॉज ये सारे रीजंस अप्रूव हो रहे हैं तो इट कैन बी अनदर साइड आल्सो ना बिकॉज इक्वली बैलेंस्ड है
Usually, even if there is equally balanced, there could be that one point which tilts you more in one direction. जैसे, there are, say, for example, 4 points to make Colombia company the acquirer, the remaining two make Brazil company the acquirer. So तब तक वो equally balanced चल रहा है. उसके बाद, there could be that one factor, for example, acquirer is normally the bigger entity, तो दूसरा entity bigger entity है. But your company has issued equity interest, so that could tilt the balance or that could tilt the scales in one direction. और अगर रेयर सर्कमस्टांसेस में ऐसा हुआ कि यार दोनों कंपनी का 50-50% कंट्रोल है, दोनों कंपनी के इक्वल नंबर ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स है, तो इन दैट केस यू कुड गो अहेड विथ इन दैट पर्टिकुलर डायरेक्शन. ठीक है, रेयर केसेस में होगा, हो सकता है, नॉट डिनाइंग द प्लॉजिबिलिटी ऑफ दैट. ठीक है. ओके. नाउ associate and joint venture. Who is an associate? An entity over which I have significant influence. More than 20, less than 50. Just because it is more than 20, less than 50, ये FR वाला आंसर हो गया. P लेवल में आके थोड़ा सा दिमाग हमको और लगाना पड़ेगा. What is the method that we use here? We use the equity method of accounting. The best part is दोनों साइड, asset side, liability side, सेम चीजें प्लस माइनस करना है. ठीक है. अमाउंट ऑफ इन्वेस्टमेंट इन एसोसिएट, उसमें यू विल ऐड शेयर ऑफ इन्वेस्टर इन पोस्ट एक्विजिशन प्रॉफिट ऑफ एसोसिएट. ठीक है. देन इम्पेयरमेंट लॉस होगा तो सब्ट्रैक्ट करो, गूड शेयर इन अनरियलाइज्ड प्रॉफिट माइनस करो. इफ यू आर नॉट टॉकिंग टू मी, प्लीज डोंट लेट योर माइक्स गो ऑफ. ऐसे मत करो. अरे अपलोड होगा यूट्यूब पे यार. आप कुछ इधर उधर बात कर रहे रहेंगे, सारी दुनिया को पता चल जाएगा क्या बात हो रही है. मेरे क्लास के एलएमएस पे अपलोड नहीं हो रहा है ना. So now, Vakkas, everyone knows that your library is 5 minutes away from your house. They can track you down and they can kidnap you.
पर क्या करेंगे ट्रैक
You are a
करके
minor, है ना? नहीं. No.
नो सर
पक्का?
यस सर
Okay, if you insist. चलो. आपने जो भी चीज कॉस्ट ऑफ इन्वेस्टमेंट इन एसोसिएट में ऐड करेंगे, सेम चीज यू विल ऐड इन द कंसोलिडेटेड रिटेन्ड अर्निंग्स आल्सो. Right? Impairment loss is calculated every year on the balance sheet date. Do you calculate goodwill in case of an associate?
नो
No, you
नो
don't
सर
calculate goodwill for an associate entity. उसमें लाइन बाय लाइन कंसोलिडेशन नहीं होगा. ठीक है. What is the accounting standard? IAS 28. Right? Now, exemption from equity method of accounting. So, IAS 28 का जो exemption है, that is pretty much similar to the IFRS. मतलब जो सब्सिडियरी का एक मतलब कंसोलिडेशन का जो एग्जेम्पशन है सेम थिंग अप्लाइज टू द इक्विटी मेथड ऑल्सो. IAS 28 applies to all investments in associates other than those classified as held for sale. Also, an investor need not apply the equity method if it is a parent that is exempt from preparing consolidated financial statements, or it meets all of the same conditions that would exempt a parent from presenting consolidated financial statements. So, if intermediate parent or investment entity wala reason say you are exempt from preparing consolidated financial statements, then we'll also exempt you from preparing, or we'll also exempt you from applying the equity method of accounting. ठीक है. Goodwill calculate नहीं होगा. Long term loan to an associate or joint venture is shown separate. A long term loan to an associate or JV is included in carrying amount of investment, not presented as a separate financial asset in the balance sheet. Amount of loan given is added to the amount of equity interest. Don't show it separately. And if there is any other change in fair value, it is recognized immediately as income. In the consolidated P&L, associate का profit लो, associate का profit post acquisition लो basically. उसमें calculate the share of holding companies, one line item add करो. This is not operating profit. हाँ, ये operating profit के बाद add होने वाला item है. ये चीज कहाँ पे काम में आएगी? व्हेन यू आर लुकिंग एट एडिशनल परफॉर्मेंस मेजर्स, एपीएम्स. आज ही बात हुआ ना त्रिषा अपना एपीएम पे,
Yes, sir.
नॉट द सब्जेक्ट विच यू शुडंट ऑप्ट फॉर बेसिकली, बट वी आर नॉट टॉकिंग अबाउट दैट. कैन यू टेल मी व्हाट आर एपीएम्स? नॉट त्रिषा, बिकॉज आज ही डिस्कस किया है मैंने. हु कैन टेल मी व्हाट इज एन एपीएम?
So the ratios that we calculate for the judging the performance of the company, like
Not
liquidity,
just
profit.
ratios. Not just ratios. That's only half of the answer. Harsha?
It's alternative performance measures basically. इकोनॉमिक परफॉर्मेंस के अलावा हम सब कुछ उसमें डिस्क्लोज करते हैं अबाउट एन एंटिटी, अबाउट कस्टमर सेटिस्फैक्शन एंड
वो तो वो है, those are additional performance measures, but those are non-financial performance indicators. For example, when you prepare a P&L, sales minus cost of sales, GP minus admin minus distribution, blah blah blah, PBIT minus interest is PBT minus taxes PAT, right? But what is APM or additional performance measure? ये figure छोड़ के, if there is some other number that you are calculating, which is essential for your analysis, drawn from the financial statements, but it is not a part of the format of P&L. For example, EBITDA, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization. That is a additional performance measure. अब जो नया अकाउंटिंग स्टैंडर्ड आ रहा है ना, IFRS 18, which is going to replace IAS 1, September 25 अटेम्प्ट से वो एप्लीकेबल हो जाएगा. उसमें ये सारे additional performance indicators के बारे में भी the accounting standard has given information. योर ओनली प्रेयर शुड बी कि वो पढ़ना ना पड़े. आप इस अटेम्प्ट में क्लियर हो जाओ तो वो पढ़ना नहीं पड़ेगा, रियल लाइफ में सिर्फ अप्लाई करना पड़ेगा उसको. ठीक है. सो वॉट एवर इज द शेयर ऑफ प्रॉफिट ऑफ द एसोसिएट, उसको वन लाइन आइटम करके ऐड कर दो. इट इज नॉट एन ऑपरेटिंग इनकम. दिस इज इनकम फ्रॉम योर एक्सपोजर टू द एसोसिएट. डिविडेंड रिसीव फ्रॉम एसोसिएट इंक्लूड करेंगे इन कंसोलिडेटेड P&L?
No, sir.
व्हाई नॉट? बिकॉज एसोसिएट
It
इज
is already included in the share of profit.
प्रॉफिट
Yes.
ऑलरेडी इंक्लूड हो चुका है, तो दोबारा डबल काउंटिंग आपको नहीं करना है. इन कंसोलिडेटेड कैश फ्लो व्हाट विल यू डू? डिविडेंड पेड बाय एसोसिएट इंक्लूड होगा?
No, sir.
नहीं होगा. इज
It will be only included when it is paid. So we'll,
पेड प्रपोज डिविडेंड का तो एंट्री आता भी नहीं है.
yes.
So tell me, why is dividend paid by subsidiary not considered, but dividend paid by associate considered? Transactions with subsidiary are eliminated, transactions with associate are not eliminated. ऐसा क्यों इतना भेदभाव? Subsidiary is a
सर
part of the group, associate is not a part of the group, है ना? ग्रुप में you only have holding and subsidiary, ये बाकी के सारे लोग they are not a part of the group, so be careful. अच्छा, losses in associate के बारे में what do you remember? Who can tell me how to tackle losses in an associate?
Losses are recognized only up to the share of investment in the associate. Any further losses are disclosed in the financial statements, and they can be recognized in the future when there are future profit against the future profits.
वाह, वेरी गुड जयनी, ये ऐसा वाला आंसर है एकदम परफेक्ट.
Thank you, sir.
If the associate has made losses, naturally share of investor in losses of the associate will have to be considered. Correct. Associate का loss निकालो, जो भी होगा, ठीक है. से फॉर एग्जाम्पल माई इन्वेस्टमेंट इन द एसोसिएट इज 1 लाख रुपीज. एसोसिएट का लॉस इज 1 लाख, बट माई शेयर इज 30%, दैट इज 30,000. तो इन्वेस्टमेंट में से 30,000 माइनस करो, 70,000 हो गया कैरिंग अमाउंट. फिर नेक्स्ट ईयर और एडिशनल लॉस हुआ, और 60,000 शेयर माइनस करो, आई एम एट 10,000. उसके नेक्स्ट ईयर और 50,000 मेरा शेयर ऑफ लॉस है. आई कैन नॉट मेक द इन्वेस्टमेंट इन एसोसिएट नेगेटिव, तो आई विल ब्रिंग इट डाउन टू जीरो एंड रिमेनिंग अमाउंट आई विल डिस्क्लोज, but I cannot show my investment in associate as a negative figure. बाद में when I start making profits, when the associate starts making profit, पहले वो जो unrecognized loss था ना, उसको knock off करो, and then start recognizing the amount of profit in the investment in associate. ठीक है. ये इस पे क्वेश्चन आ सकता है पेपर में. एक बार just go through this. This is not in Kaplan, this is only in the study hub.
That's
ठीक है. अच्छा, नो, यू शुड रीड दिस एग्जाम्पल. डिड यू रीड? ये एक बार पढ़ लो.
Done.
डन. ओके. नाउ हाउ शुड, अच्छा ये वाला सब हो गया. अभी इस पे एग्जाम्पल्स वी विल नॉट सी. The entire carrying amount of investment in an associate JV is tested for impairment by comparing it with recoverable amount. After application of equity method, including recognizing losses, the investor should determine whether there is objective evidence that the investment is impaired. The following loss events provide objective evidence of an impairment: significant financial difficulty, breach of contract, bankruptcy, or financial reorganization are probable, and disappearance of an active market for the net investment because of financial difficulties. So if these indicators, so indicators of impairment more or less same है ना. Indicators of impairment means broken, damaged piece. और अगर टेबल होगा तो वो डैमेज हो जाएगा यार, मे बी द लेग इज ब्रोकन और समथिंग. बट अगर फिनेंशियल इंस्ट्रूमेंट आपका इम्पेयर हो रहा है तो उस केस में क्या होगा? All of these indicators na, that I have given money to Bhumika and now she is ghosting me and not answering my calls, my impairment, the financial instrument is impaired, right Bhumika? देखो समझ में आ गया उसको. Intercompany transactions with associate, intercompany debtor creditor are not eliminated. ठीक है, because they are not a part, associate is not a part of the group. Associate के साथ अगर कोई इंटरकंपनी सेल परचेस है एंड देयर इज प्रॉफिट ऑन अनसोल्ड स्टॉक, उसके हमने स्टेप्स लिखे थे. डू यू रिमेंबर? अब आई हैव नेवर सीन दिस गेटिंग आस्क्ड इन द एग्जाम सो फार, बट आफ्टर डिजीवायर कंपनी आई हैव लॉस्ट फेथ इन द वर्ल्ड. वो कुछ भी पूछते हैं तो यू शुड बी प्रिपेयर्ड, which is why I did that question and then the other one also, जहां पे उसका भी एक और specific case था कि there was a downstream transaction, the asset was impaired. In that case, the entire amount will have to be recognized as a loss and not just the proportionate amount. ठीक है. एक वाइटबर्ग कंपनी पे नजर मार लेना एक बार. वाइटबर्ग कंपनी इज IFRS for SMEs. We have also done one question on IFRS for SMEs where we were talking about information asymmetry, right?
Answered.
हाँ. चलो ये स्टेप्स देख लो एक बार. ठीक है, याद करके जाना ये स्टेप्स. हाँ, पूछा तो यू शुड बी प्रिपेयर्ड टू टैकल एनीथिंग दैट हैपेंस बिटवीन इन्वेस्टर एसोसिएट. देन डिविडेंड्स फ्रॉम एसोसिएट एंटिटी do not include in consolidated P&L. In consolidated cash flow statement आपको include करना पड़ सकता है. Joint arrangements where two or more parties have joint control. अच्छा, joint control कब establish होता है? Joint control is when I cannot decide without your approval, you cannot decide it without mine, both of us have to agree upon something. जैसे I have a roommate, we want to bring a dog, both of us have to agree na, otherwise we can never proceed with that decision. You will have to keep your eyes open for the word unanimous. यूनानिमस डिसीजन मेकिंग मतलब ऑल द पार्टीज हैव टू अग्री. हमने एक क्वेश्चन किया है जिसमें A, B एंड C, देयर आर 3 co-venturers. ठीक है, एंड द क्वेश्चन इज इट इज नेसेसरी टू हैव मोर देन 72% होल्डिंग फॉर डिसीजन मेकिंग. किया है ना ऐसा क्वेश्चन? where A and B मिला के there is a 75% शेयर होल्डिंग, तो देन यू से दैट दिस पर्टिकुलर एंटिटी इज अ जॉइंट वेंचर बिटवीन A and B. है ना, सी को हटा दो, मतलब नॉट थ्रो देम आउट, बट व्हेन यू आर टॉकिंग अबाउट द कंबाइंड एंटिटी, वहां पे द ए एंड बी का मिला के 75% होल्डिंग है एंड डिसीजन मेकिंग के लिए आपको 72% होल्डिंग का जरूरत है, विच इज वाई इन दैट केस इट इज अ जॉइंट वेंचर बिटवीन ए एंड बी बिकॉज उनका कंबाइंड होल्डिंग इज 75%. ये लास्ट वीक में ही किया है शायद से ये क्वेश्चन हमने, इफ आई एम नॉट रॉन्ग. यस सुमित.
सर इसमें कुछ वेटो राइट्स का भी होता है, तो उसमें कुछ अलग कॉन्सेप्ट है कि वही है?
Veto rights are basically rights to say no or rights to overrule a decision that is made. Basically आपको ये चेक करना है कि before passing a decision, is it necessary for both the parties to agree?
बट सर एक एग्जाम किट में शायद क्वेश्चन है कोई जिसमें एक के पास, मतलब इट वाज नॉट रिटन कि यूनानिमस है, बट उसमें शायद 50% वोटिंग एक एंटिटी के पास थी जो एक्वायरर है या समथिंग लाइक दैट। तो उसमें ऐसी दिक्कत थी कि वो वेटो राइट्स और उसमें बहुत कॉन्सेप्ट था, और फिर लास्ट में वो जेवी बताया उसमें आंसर
So
में।
veto rights का veto rights in a way means unanimous decision making. How? You and I are roommates. I decide to bring a dog. You say veto. If you say veto, I can't bring the dog, right? So I need your buy-in before I proceed with buying the dog, correct?
यस सर।
So in that case, again, we'll say that uh, there is joint control. Even veto rights are basically giving you joint control only.
ओके ओके
है
सर।
ना? Now, ये कहाँ पे where they can twist the fact in the question is ना कि they will say Satyamedh Limited has 70% shareholding एंड हर्षा लिमिटेड हैज 30% शेयर होल्डिंग। तो आप तो एकदम चहक चहक के बोल दोगे अरे ये तो मेरा सब्सिडियरी एंटिटी है, व्हाई? बिकॉज सत्यमेव लिमिटेड हैज 70% होल्डिंग, बट देयर इज अ लाइन विच सेज दैट इट रिक्वायर्स यूनानिमस डिसीजन मेकिंग। So although I have 70%, Harsha has 30%, numerically I am dominating. But because the question specifically says that both the parties have to agree, there is joint control. Although मेरा 70% stake है, I cannot classify that as a subsidiary. I will have to show it as a joint venture. ठीक है? Be careful in terms of how you are looking at the statements. एक एक लाइन आपको बहुत carefully पढ़ना पड़ेगा। ठीक है? Unanimous consent, you have to get everyone to agree. If you set up a separate entity, it becomes a joint venture. If you do not set up a separate entity, it becomes joint operations. Suppose Trisha and I, we decide to start our own coaching classes, but we don't form a separate entity. I teach 3 subjects, she teaches 3 subjects. Profits बांट लेंगे. Yeah, student come, it's the same setup, but there is no separate entity established. But we are working together, decisions are taken by both of us jointly. That becomes joint ops. Joint ops में my share of asset, my share of liability, my share of income, my share of expense. Joint venture में क्या होगा? I have to use the equity method of accounting. Joint venture में a separate entity is set up. Actually, अगर आप if you really look at IFRS 11, there are a lot of other conditions also, but हमारे एग्जाम में इतने ही कंडीशंस आएंगे, तो दैट इज वेयर वी हैव टू लिमिट आवरसेल्व्स। ठीक है? ये हो गया मेरा JV एंड दिस थिंग एसोसिएट्स। नाउ व्हाट वी आर लेफ्ट विथ इज disposal, that is step acquisition, step disposal बाकी है। Certain acquisition terms are left कि when you acquire the other entity तो identifiable assets liabilities का क्या करना है। So in tomorrow's session 9 to 11 we'll finish off the discussion on consolidation. ठीक है? अभी 11 बज गए। सब लोगों को आदत नहीं है 11:30 तक बैठने का मेरे साथ। आप लोगों को तो चलो मैंने लगवा दिया है आदत। ठीक है? So let's stop here today. Let's continue with consolidation tomorrow. If मैं सैटरडे को I will not conduct a session in the evening because after 3 months I'm planning to step out of the house. So, but we can do it during the day. Sunday को evening को कर लेंगे because Sunday evening I don't go out. ठीक है? वो भी अगर मेरा प्लान कैंसिल हो गया तो मैं आपको लास्ट मिनट बुला लूंगा, आ जाना। नहीं आ पाए, आपको पार्टी करनी है तो भी मैं क्लास कंडक्ट कर लूंगा, रिकॉर्डिंग डाल दूंगा, वो चेक कर लेना। ठीक है? Now, and I'm going to sound very sad, but still I will say, I will upload it on the YouTube channel. आगे का प्लीज आप समझ लो, डोंट मेक मी से इट। आई कैनॉट physically say like, comment, subscribe, whatever, but कर देना। I want my work to reach more and more people. ठीक है? चलो, बाकी आपके जो भी डाउट्स है वो बता दो। कल जो भी डाउट्स रहेंगे मैं 11 के बाद डाउट सॉल्व कर दूंगा। बट अभी जैसे आज हर्षा हैड सेंटेड आउट, इट वाज वेरी स्पेसिफिक। अभी आपके डाउट्स कैसे होने चाहिए? योर डाउट शुड बी ये पूरा कंसोलिडेशन है या ये पूरा फाइनेंशियल इंस्ट्रूमेंट है, मुझे ये एंट्री का ये वैल्यू नहीं समझा, ये डाउट ठीक है। हाँ, मुझे एम्प्लॉय बेनिफिट कुछ भी नहीं पता इज अ वेरी कैरी डाउट फॉर मी। अभी ये सब मत बोलना कि मुझे एम्प्लॉय बेनिफिट नहीं पता, मुझे ये नहीं पता, मुझे वो नहीं पता। One very important point for everyone. You know what is the difference between pass and fail in SBR? There's only one difference. एक ही टॉपिक है,
Stability.
सस्टेनेबिलिटी। आपका पूरा फॉर्चून इज गोइंग टू बी डिफाइंड बाय दिस टॉपिक सस्टेनेबिलिटी। तो भगवान के लिए वो अच्छे से करके जाना, मेरे लिए करके जाना। ठीक है, मैं पैर पढ़ लूंगा बाद में। प्लीज सस्टेनेबिलिटी करके जाओ पेपर में। इट कम्स इन द पेपर एवरी सिंगल अटेम्प्ट। All standards that you think are stupid standards, IFRS 8 सेगमेंट रिपोर्टिंग, ACCA को कुछ नया प्यार हो गया है वो स्टैंडर्ड से। एवरी अटेम्प्ट इन द लास्ट 3 अटेम्प्ट आई हैव सीन IFRS 8 सेगमेंट रिपोर्टिंग आ रहा है। देन IAS 19 आई हैव सीन गेटिंग टेस्टेड वेरी वेरी फ्रीक्वेंटली आजकल। तो वो एक बार अच्छे से देख लेना IAS 19, एंड उसमें भी इट्स डिफाइंड बेनिफिट प्लान ओनली, बाकी कुछ नहीं आएगा। मैक्सिमम कर्टेलमेंट आ सकता है। ठीक है। और लीजेस में सबलीज आया तो हमने किया है। वी हैव डन सबलीज यस्टरडे, आई हैव मेड यू फिजिकली राइट सबलीज। सबलीज आ सकता है, अदरवाइज लीजेस में पूछने को बहुत कुछ है, बट वो रेपिटेटिव नेचर का है लीजेस में जो भी आता है वो। ठीक है। टुमारो अपना कंसोलिडेशन होने के बाद ना मैं IAS 12 का क्विक रिवीजन करा दूंगा। उसमें जो अनरी सो कैरी फॉरवर्ड ऑफ लॉसेस एंड IFRS 2 वाला एडजस्टमेंट पे स्पेसिफिक फोकस। ठीक है। एंड बाकी देखते हैं फिर।
So, I just wanted to ask, is lease modification a part of our syllabus? Lease modification.
वी हैव डन लीज मॉडिफिकेशन ना।
हाँ, तो वो है ना?
हाँ है ना।
हाँ।
ऐसे डोंट आस्क, अभी आई एम गेटिंग स्कैर्ड कि मैंने कराया कि नहीं कराया क्लास
नहीं
में।
नहीं करा है, I just wanted to confirm.
बिकॉज कल मैंने तो इतनी बड़ी बड़ी बातें कर दी, मैंने सब कर दिया, अभी तुम्हारा काम है। आफ्टर दैट इफ आई गेट टू नो आई हैवंट कवर्ड एनीथिंग, तो इट्स सच अ शेमफुल थिंग फॉर मी।
No, no, you have.
लीज मॉडिफिकेशन है, एम्बेडेड डेरिवेटिव्स नहीं है इस सिलेबस में। एम्बेडेड डेरिवेटिव हटा दिया है सिलेबस से। ठीक है।
Yes.
चलो अभी, अच्छा ट्राई टू गेट सम स्लीप ऑल्सो इन द लास्ट वन। एक वीक है और प्लीज डोंट स्टार्ट पैनिकिंग। यू आर नॉट राइटिंग ट्रिपल ई की मंडे को आपका पेपर है और आपको रोना धोना शुरू करना है। वो रोना धोना हम साथ मिलके नेक्स्ट वीक करेंगे पेपर के पहले। ठीक है।
Sir, you are going to say something after the recording, right?
दिस डजंट गो आउट। हाँ,